All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our community webinar series. We're generally excited about the concept of sharing with our community on topics that are relevant to all of us as recruiters, as heads of talent, as hiring leaders. We generally find ourselves part of a community where there's some really great practices going on, and the goal again of this series is to share in topics that we could all benefit from to help our teams and clients generally do better in recruiting, and therefore build the teams that our clients need from us. Just a little bit from a logistics perspective, we expect this the content of this webinar to go anywhere between 30 to 40 minutes. We have a Q&A section at the end. But as I can imagine, from a participant perspective, a lot of the content that you'll be hearing is fairly rich in nature and may prompt questions throughout. So as you have a question, feel free to pop it into the chat, and our moderator, Kirsten, will capture it, and she'll either bring up that question as makes natural sense throughout, or bring it up right at the end during our Q&A section. You could also, there's a feature in this in the webinar to ask the question as yourself or anonymously. So feel free to either do one or the other in asking. Bringing us to the topic of diagnosing your recruiting funnel. In this case, diagnosing referring to getting to the root cause or understanding the core problem of whatever might be happening. And then the recruiting funnel, I think we're all generally familiar with being the stages in process, inception through to closure. So again, diagnosing your recruiting funnel in simple words, understanding what's happening in your recruiting process, and then empowering yourself as a recruiter, as a head of talent, or as a hiring leader to be able to address it. In my experience in recruiting, I can't think of a better person to present on this topic than James Hunt. James Hunt, co-founder of Bink, currently a partner and general manager. He oversees a number of the recruiters at our firm and projects that we deliver on. He's been with Bink for 10 years and has seen a number of dare I say, countless scenario situations, client types, recruiter types, really empower him to share on this topic of diagnosing your recruiting funnel. Before Bink, James spent a brief jaunt at Bridgewater, a large hedge fund back east that really takes the concept of diagnosis to the next level. Before that, I spent 10 years at Microsoft, and so bringing his collective 20 years of recruiting experience to us today, I'll give you James Hunt.
Thanks, Boris, and thank you everyone for coming today. Very excited to jump into our presentation. So yeah, let's jump right in. So why is this an important topic? Because Boris mentioned, I've spent a lot of my entire career pretty much in recruiting, and within the tech space or within tech within other industries. And certainly I've always had a passion for kind of uncovering patterns and figuring out, hey, what's causing this and what's causing that. But I didn't quite go as deep as I knew could happen until my time at Bridgewater, where diagnosis was such a core part of the business, and learned a lot about the importance and the value of actually going after root cause. And so I've applied that over the years during my time here at Bink and working with, as Boris mentioned, a really wide range of companies and clients that we've put assigned recruiting teams to go deliver on full cycle recruiting programs for those companies, basically functioning as the in-house recruiting team, or sitting side by side with the in-house recruiting team, and then delivering. And of course, along the way, there's always challenges, there's always opportunities that pop. And over the years, it became very important to really have a good perspective, data perspective, a way for looking at the data. And so why is this, in addition to kind of what I mentioned so far, why is this an important and compelling topic? Like, why is it important to diagnose your recruiting pipeline? Well, I think many of us know the recruiting is a house of cards. There are so many failure points along the way where candidates can fall out of process. Any number of things can happen. There's so many stages, there's so many gates that need to be passed through. So with all those opportunities for essentially failure points, um, uh, how do we design and maintain a machine, if you will, that is optimizing for as few failures as possible? Um, Second reason is, gosh, we're making all of this investment. There's so much time that we put into everybody who participates in recruiting and hiring. We put a lot of time and effort into this, and we want to see an investment or we want to see a return at the end of that investment. And so, what things can we put in place to ensure that? Another big reason is just to diagnose your pipeline to get to the root cause. Why are certain things happening, good or bad? Why are they happening? And then being able to take that and optimize your process, optimize your sort of whole program to get you the results that you really want. And then to get you those better results. So to get to the better outcomes. So today we're gonna go through the process of looking under the hood of the recruiting machine and figure out what's working, what's not, and how to get it to that high performing state. Um, so um, I'm going to outline in today's presentation. I'm going to outline kind of 8 core steps to diagnosing a pipeline. First step is the recruiting process. We'll talk about that. I mean, setting and defining your recruiting process is important. You need to have it in place as well defined as possible. It doesn't have to be defined down to every last element, but enough so that it is a working machine. Second is we're going to set benchmarks. We need to figure out what are the benchmarks by which we know how we're doing, that we can compare against. We want to track data, so we want to make sure that we're in a place to have data to review and therefore diagnose. We're going to review that data against benchmarks, see how we're doing as it relates to the benchmarks we set. Once we're doing that and reviewing that, we're going to zero in on those optimal and suboptimal outcomes, diagnose those outcomes, get to the bottom of them, and then develop solutions that essentially lead to or sustain optimal outcomes. And the final step is we want to repeat this regularly. So this is something that you want to set up a rhythm and follow this process on a regular basis so that you're continually looking and improving your process. Okay, so before we jump into diagnosis, just a quick section on candidate value proposition. No, this is not a presentation on candidate value prop, or also what we'll be referring to often in this presentation as CVP, although it would be a great topic maybe for the next webinar. But we're going to hear it enough today. I'm going to bring it up enough today as we kind of get into root causes and recommended resolutions that I thought it'd be good to just refresh everyone on the concept. So what is the candidate value proposition? So first of all, there's about 4 or 5 main components here. First one, and really the way to think about this is, why would a candidate be interested or attracted to joining your company, and how can you build that out so that they get it, that it makes sense. Okay, I understand what this company's doing. I understand what's happening. I understand what I'll be doing here, and I understand why it's a good place for me to go join. First is kind of, where does it fit into the world? Where does what you're doing fit into the industry? Just the kind of, what's the impact? What's the purpose and mission of this company? Second is, what is the company actually doing within this space, this industry? What is the core business and business model for this company? Second is, who's there? How is the team composed? But then also, how are the various teams structured? Which teams work on which? And in particular, if I'm a candidate, which team are you asking me to consider joining? And what does that team do? Tell me more about the core purpose and mission and responsibilities of that team. And then roles. Once we've zeroed in on the team, what are the roles? What are the specific jobs? Is this an analyst job? Is it a front-end engineer job? Is it an office manager job? let's get into, we always want to know what is the role. That's such a common area. And then finally, the person. Where does the person, how do they feel that they fit into all this? What's their place in all this? How does this, what are the interests and passions of this individual that match or don't match to what they can gain and achieve and be a part of at your company? Okay, so that's candidate value prop, and we'll talk about that. It'll come through at various points during today's presentation. And in summary, candidate value prop, I like to think of it as the story. What's the story that you can tell candidates about why coming to your company or joining your team or filling this role at your company, what's the story behind that? What's exciting about that? Okay, so let's get into the first step, so setting that recruiting process. Going to go through sort of there's two sections to the recruiting process that I like to talk about. First is the top of funnel, or actually first is these core process bucket areas. These are all pretty comprehensive buckets, and you'll note that there's a number of sub steps and process elements that go into each of these. But top of funnel, this is how we get people interested or people essentially engaged into some kind of conversation regarding opportunities at your company. Candidate engagement is, okay, once they've sort of said, yes, I'm interested in talking, this is how that goes. How are those interactions along the way? Everything from that first phone call with a recruiter, or maybe a coffee with a friend who's on the team, to every interaction along the way throughout the entire process, up until when a candidate joins and becomes a part of the organization. This is candidate engagement. It's a really important part. It can include directly connects to the candidate experience as well. And the next bucket is assessment, right? This is we're all super familiar with this. This is interviews, screens, interviews, all the different parts of the process where we decide, okay, does this person meet the qualification requirements for the role that we are recruiting for. Offers, pretty self-explanatory. This is the sub-elements here are the decision to make an offer, the development of that offer itself, the approval of that offer, negotiations of offer, and ultimately the signing of that offer. Hires, when it's clear that these candidates are going to become employees, and then actually when they become employees. So these are our bucket areas. And then to the right here, these are the primary process stages that we're going to focus on in today's presentation as we go through some sample review, data review, and diagnosis. We should all be familiar. It's the outbound messaging, the outreach, the hit-ups, how we're reaching out to candidates and getting them interested. Recruiter phone screen, that's that first initial call with the recruiter. This third one is a catch-all bucket, but it can be technical phone interviews if it's for a technical role, but really it's functional, or hiring manager or whoever is designated in the process to do that first functionally focused phone interview. And we'll refer to this through the rest of the presentation as phone screen. Then the on-site interview stage, the offer stage, and then the sort of the offer accept or decline stage. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so we've set our process. Now let's make sure we can collect data from it. So here's where we're going to talk briefly about tracking recruiting data. So as I mentioned before, we're going to be tracking these core process stages, these core 6 process stages, and we want to be able to track the base conversions between these stages. And here's an example or a sample of a funnel of where you can see a funnel report with number and percentage of candidates passing through to each stage. So this is what we want to be able to get to, and we'll talk a little bit about what are the important sub-metrics that we need to track in order to be able to present this kind of data and ultimately review it. So to track conversion data, so here are some of the key sub-metrics we'll want to be able to set up and track. Nearly all ATSs should track candidate movement through the funnel, sort of workflow movement with data stamps for each stage. However, if your ATS doesn't track all these, I do recommend some kind of add-on system, whether it's like a Google Sheets or some kind of spreadsheet or a data analysis tool, or consider a new ATS that does sort of get you this core data. Really want to first very key step is the dates. Dates are really important. It's not just that they were at a particular stage in the process, but when they were, because this timestamp gives us a very reportable data set. And these are all the stages that I recommend having dates for as they move through the funnel. Of course, the conversion percentage between each of those process stages as candidates pass through. Third one is the time between stages in days. This is really important and often overlooked, but once surfaced and reviewed from a data perspective is very revealing about potentially areas for optimization. And then not just most of us track, okay, someone fell out of process because of X reason. We definitely want to make sure we're tracking that, but where we can track a secondary reason as well will be extremely important as we go dive deeper into that data and get an even better understanding, deeper understanding of why did that candidate fall out of process. So for example, a primary would be a company is passing on the candidate, and a secondary would be they're passing on the candidate because of coding skills. And for a candidate withdrawal, it could be a candidate saying, hey, I'm pulling out of the process because the commute is too far for me. And so we'd want to know both those elements. They bring a fair amount of insight into the process. All right, so we've defined our process. Our data tracking is set up. Let's establish some performance benchmarks that tell us how we're doing along the way. Benchmark. So before getting into too much of the benchmark or into the details of benchmarks, let's just talk about what is a benchmark. Benchmark in the context, one of the definitions in a context that resonates for me in this diagnosis process is a benchmark is a standard or a point of reference that you've set, which then you can compare and assess your actual results to. You can very easily say these are goals, these are the core metrics we're setting. That we will look at and say, okay, how are we doing against these benchmarks? Now, a thing to note, and here are the Bink's benchmark conversions. These are what we've used, these are what we've developed over 8.5 years of recruiting with 100+ seed to pre-IPO and public stage companies. But we don't necessarily apply these across the board the same to every type of company. We use best judgment to determine if we want to adjust those or how we believe we're performing relative to those benchmarks may vary from circumstance to circumstance, but it's a starting off point. I think that's the most important thing. I think it's important to note that these are what we've come up with, but you may come up with a different set of benchmarks and say, you know what, these are the types of conversions that we can live with. These are the ones we want to be achieving on a regular basis. And just a little asterisk there, call out that the positive response rate. So this is going to outbound a recruiter screen. This is who's the emails or in-mails or any other types of outbound messages that you're sending out. What's the number or percentage of people that are responding back positively saying, yes, I'm interested in talking. This varies widely between well and lesser known company brands. So 5% is what we have in there, but the much better known, well-known brands in the market are going to have in the 15, 20, 30% positive response rate. And then whereas a lesser known brand that just doesn't have that notoriety yet can be in that sort of 3 to 5 and down to 1 or even below 1%. But just wanted to note that. Okay. So now that we've defined our process, we've set up our data tracking, established our benchmarks. Now we're fast forwarding through several weeks or months of recruiting activity and getting ready to review some data, some actual data, and zoom in on those outcomes. Okay, so first review here. Here is our first conversion sample, a well-known brand, so a company that has good traction, good notoriety in the market. And here are the conversions. We've got the 20% conversion rate, actual conversion rate. on outbound to recruiter screen, 29% for the amount of candidates that are converting from recruiter screen to actually a submission, an introduction to a hiring manager or resume reviewer. Of those submissions, 68% of them are making it to the phone screen. Of those phone screens, 39% are passing through to the on-site interview. And then of the everyone that's making it to an on-site interview, 42% of them are converting to offers. And then ultimately, of all those offers, 40% are accepting. The next row down is the benchmarks that we've sort of set for this type of project. And everything's the same as the previous slide, except we've increased that outbound to recruiter screen percentage. And then on the very bottom row are the number of days between each of the sections, number of days between the stages. These are average number of days between that candidates that it's taking for candidates to advance from one stage to the next. And this is where that date stamp comes in as a pretty critical component. And so, given this, we're going to start with our first poll question about this slide. Okay, here are the results. So looks like via the poll, we have the most number of votes for the on-site to offer rate, followed by recruiter screen to submission days, followed by offer accept rate, and a couple, none of the above. And I will say that I agree. The most optimal number on this slide is that on-site to offer rate. This is great. You know, if a benchmark of 25%, which is just shy of 1 in 3 on-sites, or sorry, it's 1 in 4 on-sites converting to offer, to be able to nearly double that is impressive, and this is great. This is I'm very happy. If this was if I was recruiting for this this company, I'd be very happy with this result. So let's pop over to the next slide. Now we have some color. Let's zero in on a few of these. But first, a poll question. So yes, looks like a resounding all of the above, which is correct in terms of what is the possible cause of low recruiter screen to submission. Candidates not attracted to the value prop. Yep, very possible reason that when we're getting candidates on the phone and telling them about the company, they're just not interested. They're saying, you know what, this isn't for me. Is it possible that the recruiters aren't fully prepared enough to really represent that value prop well? Is it possible that that value prop is poorly defined? All of these are possible reasons or causes for that for the lower recruiter screen to submission rates. Okay, so let's take a look. So in looking through the results here on the slide, so that outbound to recruiter screen, that's green. Green is, this is optimal. We feel good about this. Surely let's take an opportunity to make it better and exploit on potentially what may be a great strength of ours, but we're happy with the results. So 20% positive response rate, this is great, this is solid. It would be great to zero in on that and say, okay, why is this happening? And what more can we do to continue to increase the positive response rate? Because there's certainly benefit to increasing that positive response rate as long as we're continuing to go after the candidates that seem to be a good match for our roles. So that 29% recruiter screen to submission, this is concerning. I look at this and I say, gosh, as a recruiter, me or my team of recruiters, we're talking to a lot of people, but only 29% of them are advancing forward. I really want to know why that's happening. Because I think that there might be a more efficient use of all of our time if more of those recruiter screens are moving forward and moving through the process. And who knows, there's a number of reasons that could be happening. And so I'd want to, once we get into diagnosis, I'd want to ask a fair amount of questions to uncover that. So you notice that some of these are still gray, and they're gray because, well, they're not above the benchmark, they're not exactly at the benchmark, but given the ones that we're excited about and the ones that we're most concerned about, we're generally okay with these. We'll come back to these in terms of improving there, but let's really address the ones that we're most concerned about first. And we talked about the on-site to offer. This is great, we're happy with that. But the offer accept rate, gosh, we're advancing candidates offer, which is exciting. So there's something working in our assessment part of the funnel. But if less than half of them are accepting, that's sort of a bummer. We really, at this point, we've made it so far in the process. We've advanced candidates so far, and to have them decline at this point seems like it's a missed opportunity or a huge opportunity to convert more of that so that we can get more hires. And then we look at the days down below. So 10 days from outbound to recruiter screen, it's fine. I mean, gosh, it'd be great if someone replied to my outbound within 5 days of me sending it, but 10 days isn't completely out of bounds. Generally I'm okay with it, but I'd like to see that improve a little bit. But first of all, I want to look at the number of days that it takes from when I submit a candidate to when a phone screen actually happens. It's taking almost 3 weeks for that. I think it really should only be taking about 1 week. I'm concerned about that. And then the amount of time it takes from when someone completes a phone screen and is given the thumbs up, well, actually that's assuming a bit. They've completed the phone screen, but their onsite isn't taking place until almost 4 weeks later or 3.5 weeks later. That's really concerning. I really want to get to the bottom of that and uncover that. And then that onsite to offer stage, that's definitely something that we'll probably turn to red pretty soon after I feel like I've addressed the other part. Is like, why is it taking us so long to address, or why is it taking us so long to get an offer to a candidate? Okay, next slide. This is our second sample. So here, second sample, but now with a company that has little to no brand in the candidate market. At this point, we're going to ask our next poll question, and I'll wait for that to pop up. Okay, looks like we have our answers. So yes, correct answer is the most concerning number on this slide is the outbound to recruiter screen conversion. And so let's add some color. So we have 1%, a 1% conversion rate. This is definitely red. It's not shocking or surprising that this could happen, that, for example, you're recruiting for a startup that really there isn't much out there. People don't know about it, but there's a great story there. But for whatever reason, well, for unsurprising reasons, about 1 in 100 people are responding positively, saying, yes, I'm interested in talking. But it's definitely something that we can improve, and there's a lot of things we can do to improve that. Popping over to what we're happy with, so the phone screen to onsite, 54%. So this is solid. I mean, it's above our benchmark. A healthy amount, but not too many people are advancing to the onsite. When we look at our onsite to offer, it is lower. And so that may tell us, gosh, are these correlated? We're letting too many people through to the onsite. But one thing to watch out for is there, like, how big are these numbers? Is it potential? We've got sort of the law of small numbers happening here. And then our offer to accept rate isn't great. It's trending, it's trending in the right direction. While the benchmark is 80%, that's what we're going for. We know that in this market, most companies are living with the 50 to 60%, and probably in this case, we might be okay with that. But let's look at ways we can improve that. But certainly, let's increase the amount of candidates that we're getting into the funnel. And then we look at the days between stages. The amount of days it's taking to get from recruiter screen to submission is suspiciously high. If a candidate recruiter and a candidate have a great call, how come it's taking almost 2 weeks or week and a half in order to introduce that candidate to the hiring manager? And then the 17 days from onsite to offer, this is concerning. We want to figure out, okay, why is it taking us so long to get to that? Are we having a hard time making decisions? Or are we having a lot of candidates who are in process of other companies? What are we doing things to essentially slow down the process where we could be moving more quickly? Okay, all right, next slide. So now we've defined our process, set up data tracking, established our benchmarks, and we've reviewed our data and zeroed in on some optimal and suboptimal outcomes. So now let's talk about how we can start diagnosing, getting to root cause, and then addressing some of these outcomes. Okay, so here are the common trouble areas we surfaced from our 2 samples. In quick summary, Positive response rate, big area that we want to dig into a little bit more. Recruiter screen to submission. What can we do to improve the conversions and time there? Generally, how are candidates moving through, converting through the various stages of assessment that we have, from screen to onsite, ultimately to the decision to offer. The speed of our funnel, like how quickly are candidates moving through the process, and how can we further diagnose that? And then declines. We're getting declines. How do we better understand that and address that? Okay, so now I'm going to run. Let's diagnose. We're going to diagnose first the low positive response rate by going through a series of questions that we want to be asking. So, first question: are you getting negative responses? Am I hearing from people who are saying, I'm not interested, and this is why I'm not interested? Are we getting more reasons as to why they're not interested? And what are they? Let's start to gather whatever we have, whatever we're getting from the market on that, whatever feedback we're getting. Next question, have we invested as a company, as a recruiter, as a company, as a recruiting team, everybody involved in the process, in defining our CVP, our candidate value prop? Can everybody tell the story? Does our pitch lay out the candidate value prop for our company, for the team, for the tech, and the role? Is there enough information online for candidates to learn about our company, to check out who we are, what we do, and just generally what it would be like to work at our company? Is there negative information online? Has there been negative press? Are there negative reviews on Glassdoor? We should definitely make sure we're figuring out what's out there that could be deterring candidates from saying, yes, I want to talk to you. And then, are we doing anything? Like, what are we doing to get the word out there and create buzz? Are there any kind of activities we're doing to just create more energy in the market around our company? Now we're going to jump into sort of what are some of the common causes, in summary, and common resolutions that we can do once we get answers to these questions. So yeah, it's very possible we have an unattractive or poorly defined CVP, low market awareness, or even differentiation, that where candidates look at our opportunity and say, this doesn't feel much different than the 10 other opportunities that I hear about every day. There could be limited, or actually there could be limited info out there, or negative information. We need to address both of those. And it's possible our outreach is very generic, that we're not telling the story in our outreach is at the level that we should. So big common resolutions here are, we got to invest in that candidate value prop. Really, what is the story of our company? And have we really doubled down on this as an important thing to invest in? We need to, once we've really invested in that, are we telling the story, and how are we telling that story? And then, are we iterating that in terms of how we're pitching, whether it's through email, in-mails, in person? Are we getting better and are we perfecting that pitch? How's our online brand? The first thing that a candidate does after they've decided, they've received a message and they've decided, this is interesting, I'm intrigued, is they go to our website. They go look at our website and they go do everything they can to learn about what's publicly available. They'll go to LinkedIn and see who works at the company. They'll do their research. And if that research continues to give them positive reasons to engage, they will. But if it doesn't, then we lose them. And we never know. We just never know about that gap in the process. And then, how do we get the buzz out there? Events is a great way to do that. Hosting events in your office, in your headquarters, tech talks, hosting technical meetups, or any other types of meetups, going to conferences, all of the above. Okay, next one is the interview, how candidates are moving through the process, converting through the assessment stages. So I always say, go read through all the feedback notes. If you found yourself where a lot of candidates are just getting passed on and it's frustrating, go read through all the feedback, read a bunch of feedback on all the candidates that have been passed on, and then those that have made it through, and do some pattern matching. Like look at the candidate backgrounds, look at their performance interviews, and see if you notice any patterns across how those candidates are feeling. And then do you see patterns for those that are advancing? Are there specific areas where candidates are consistently underperforming? This can be a good indicator that can be fed back to the top of your funnel, as well as what's being assessed during the interviews. Speaking of which, are screens and interviews consistently assessing the same competencies? Or is it vary pretty widely, and different interviewers are asking different questions, trying to assess the same skills? Doing prep calls with candidates, are you doing that? Are they coming in with expectations set for how best to prepare and sort of be at their best during the interview? And then, why are candidates, this is always a good question to ask. So if they're failing at one stage, but they're succeeding at the previous stage, why? Why are they being cleared from the previous stage? And is that something to look at deeper? Like, does that mean that maybe they shouldn't be moving forward? So common causes through the assessment process for low conversions is sourcing profiles off. Maybe we're just going after the wrong people. We're pulling the wrong people into process, and the wrong people, the wrong candidates, or the candidates that aren't the best match the roles, are advancing to the various stages when it should be clear earlier on that it's not a match. Are candidates not prepared? This is a very common reason that candidates show up to an interview and they weren't ready for this specific company's kind of style of screening and interviewing. But they could have been. It's not necessarily a representation of their qualifications, had they just had the right direction on how to go prepare. Is the assessment process poorly defined, not consistent? This is a common area that can derail or lead to low conversions. And then related to that, the folks that are doing the interviewing and screening, are they not optimally calibrated to what the hiring manager has set as what we want to hire for? What the recruiter is out there going and looking for and setting expectations with candidates and preparing candidates. If the interview team isn't aligned with that, that can certainly lead to some low conversions. And so common resolutions here are just from a sourcing perspective, sourcing strategy, take the feedback and say, okay, how can I make sure I'm going after the candidates that are going to be have the highest likelihood of being successful through the process? Then is look at, okay, how can we make sure our assessment process is consistent, that we're ensuring consistency across the board, and that our interviewers and screeners are all well calibrated? How can we prepare candidates? We're not giving them the answers, but how can we prepare and set expectations appropriately so that they're in the best position to be there, to perform at their most optimal, or what is the most likely that they'll perform at once they're in the job? And then, of course, another is to increase the filter. Say, gosh, too many candidates are making it to Onsite and failing for reasons that could have been covered in the phone screen. Let's add those areas more strictly into the phone screen. Okay, speaking of speed, I'm going to go a little more quickly through funnel speed, just so that we make sure we have time for Q&A. So funnel speed. I don't know about you guys, but as a recruiter, I just like things to move as quickly as possible. And I know sometimes we have to slow down, and we do that, but when it's taking a long time, that's when I step back and say, why is it taking so long? There should be some pretty basic turnaround time on various stages through the process. And so these are the types of questions I like to ask. First of all, is it taking longer than 24 hours to make a decision on whether or not the candidate should move forward from any of the stages? Is it taking longer than 5 days to schedule a phone interview? It shouldn't take that long on average. Certainly there's circumstances where candidates are on vacation, but it should be an exception more than it should be the consistency. And then if it's taking longer than 10 days to schedule an Onsite, that too tells me that, gosh, why is this happening? I really want to understand why this is happening. Is it taking longer than 2 days to make a decision to offer or not? Or longer than 2 days to get the offer approved? How long is it taking to do that? Are resume reviewers slow to respond? And then, of course, what we can all see, especially during big ramp-ups, is our screeners and interviewers just limited availability. It's really hard to schedule, find time with them. And then is there a generally low urgency within the company or within the people that are involved in the process around recruiting and hiring that's maybe different than the urgency you're carrying, or the urgency that that the company's leadership has around it? There might be a disconnect. And then finally, are there any extra or unnecessary steps in the process that maybe have sort of accumulated over time? We'll call it process debt, recruiting process debt, that when taken another look at and removed or changed because they're really no longer necessary, could speed things up. So yes, things that can lead to low funnel speed is not the same level of shared urgency held by everybody in the process. So the availability and or exhaustion of interviewers, process steps that can be removed, take-home assignments certainly can slow things down by adding up to an extra week onto a candidate's time through the process. And then candidate engagement. If candidates are the reason that the days are taking long, there's many days between process, maybe it's because the candidate just isn't as interested and we need to engage them more and get them interested in investing more. Common resolutions. I always ask the business leaders I'm working with, hiring managers, screaming from the mountaintop that that hiring is the utmost priority. It's a huge priority. We've got to focus it. We've got to make sure everybody has that. Speed as a general principle. Let's train more interviewers. Let's redesign our process. And of course, let's invest in that candidate value prop so that we have more ammo to engage candidates along the way. Okay. So for offer declines, here are the questions. These are super common. We want to know why candidates are declining. Is it comp? Is it role? Is it candidate value prop? A number of more detailed questions that we can be asking. Did we see this coming along the way, but we just sort of hoped that it would get better versus addressing it in terms of the candidate was giving us signs that they weren't as engaged or they weren't as interested, or this maybe wasn't the greatest match to them, but we were hoping that it would change their mind by just continuing through the process. Could we have done more things to address that? Is comp competitive? We really have to make sure, and it's something that you have to constantly revisit because the market is constantly changing. It's becoming more and more competitive, and we have to ensure that we're staying competitive with compensation. And then candidate experience. Did that candidate experience include a lot of great exposure to all the different elements that support the value prop that you want that candidate to feel? And so again, the common suspect is the unattractive or poorly defined candidate value prop, and compensation and various elements of candidate engagement. And so yes, invest in that candidate value prop, ensure the comp is competitive, and make sure you're engaging the candidate and prioritizing that candidate experience. Okay, so in recap, we've gone through all of these steps. We looked at the process, we set our benchmarks, we tracked the data, we reviewed our data against our benchmarks, we zeroed in on the optimal and suboptimal outcomes, we diagnosed, we started to diagnose those outcomes, developed and went through sort of the common solutions to get to more optimal outcomes, and then moving forward, repeat, figure out what's the regular rhythm for doing this. We recommend doing a light version of this on a weekly basis, a full version of it on a monthly basis, and then a full version again on a quarterly basis, and then annual basis. The longer the time period, the more data you have, but the shorter the time period, you can focus on slightly smaller data sets, but you catch things before they become too big of a problem. And so with that, I know we went through a lot of content, and I zoomed through some of the last handful of slides, but if there's three things that you leave today remembering, let it be these. First, invest in candidate value prop. It's so important. There's so many opportunities available to talent in the market today. How the story that we've defined and that we tell to people is so critical, and it needs to be invested in. And people don't necessarily, companies invest in their customer value prop. They spend millions of dollars in investing in their customer value prop, but they don't do necessarily a requisite, they don't always do a requisite investment in the candidate value prop. So it's huge. It almost always comes back to that if you get that really in a really good place, it can serve you quite well through the rest of the process. Second is, don't tolerate bad outcomes. Look at the data and go, gosh, that's bad. I don't want that to be bad anymore. I want to turn that into a good outcome. And I'm gonna be kind of relentless in figuring out how we can do that. And then third, related to that, is get to that root cause. It's easy to look at a bad outcome and go, oh, I know why that's happening. And it's just never gonna change, or I know what to do about it. take the time to ask the questions, to uncover things, and ask and get to the bottom of, okay, what is the root cause here? And is it possible that the root cause is not what I suspected it would be? And with that, I will sort of conclude the presentation part of today. And before we get into Q&A, I know that Kirsten would like to do a quick poll survey for everyone on sort of just feedback on how today went. And I'll let her do that. And then we can jump into questions and answers. And Kirsten, if I don't know if we can start with questions while people are filling out the survey, we can do that too, if there are any.
Absolutely. There are a couple questions. The first is, what happens if one person's diagnosis is different from another person's diagnosis? Example, if a recruiter has a different diagnosis than the hiring manager or head of talent.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, these are good discussions, and it's quite possible that, again, if everyone involved is asking the questions and is focused on getting to an objective root cause, getting to root cause and through as objective a process as possible, then good things will come from that. And if you identify, numerous causes, we sometimes can call proximate causes, this is good because multiple causes can lead to those poor results. If you want to get agreement on something where there's a strong disagreement, getting to the data and supporting it with the data is really important. And if the data certainly supports both diagnoses, then I'd say that's okay. Then work together to address those problems. But if the data uncovers that maybe it doesn't validate what someone is asserting as a root cause, then usually that should be something that isn't prioritized.
Great. We have another one. When should you be satisfied with the root cause?
It's a good question. I mean, ultimately you should be satisfied when you feel like the problem has been solved, that you've reached a more optimal outcome. If you think you've identified root cause and then you develop a solution to get to optimal outcome, but it doesn't improve your outcomes, and it even makes it worse, then it means you had the wrong root cause and you've got to go back. You've got to go back and dig further into that root cause.
And do you have any preferred tools and sheets that you use to track your metrics?
Well, at Bink, we use a combination of an ATS that tracks and houses all of like the workflow data. We combine that with some kind of API stuff to spit data out to Google Sheets, as well as a data dashboard. So these are the tools we use. We've really customized that over the years so that we can get to the data we need. But I know some companies that they use an ATS combined with a data analytics platform, and that really gives them what they need. It gives them the workflow tracking so they can track all the right data, and the dashboards that give them those graphs and charts that display to them, hey, here are your conversions, here's your speed of funnel.
The next question is, in candidate preparation, how do you set expectations of the coding challenge without giving it away while still getting them excited?
One thing is to tell a candidate, here are the things that we're assessing. We want to understand your familiarity with, let's say, data structures and algorithms. And the questions that you're going to be asked are going to be really centering on that. Or we just really want to see how you flow through like writing code, how you write and test and debug code. So just think about that as the interviewer is asking you to solve a problem, that's what we're really interested in understanding. These are the types of things I would say, but I always want to understand what is the interviewer or screener attempting to assess, what are the questions they're asking, so that I have the context. I understand the context of what the interviewer is trying to accomplish, and I can help the candidate understand that these are the areas that this interview will be focusing on, and so be prepared to show what you know as it relates to that.
Great, and I think we have time for about one more. The next one is, how many candidates should you vet before starting to look at your metrics?
That's a good question. I don't know that I don't know that I actually think that there's a number of candidates that we have. I mean, certainly there probably is too little to really have meaningful conversion data. But what I would say is 1 month. I would actually put a time structure around it. That if you look at if you think about you just started tracking your recruiting data. For us, it's when we start an engagement. We start with a company and we're like, okay, we need to hire this many people in this time frame. That first month of data is going to tell us something important. It's not going to tell us everything. We're not going to necessarily have late stage funnel conversion data that's super telling, but we are going to have a lot of top of and mid funnel data that will be very insightful, that we'll want to be able to review, analyze, and act on. So that would be my recommendation is 1 month.
Great, and we do have one last question. When do you make the call to use an agency? And I think we'll stop with questions. Any other questions, we'll get back to and send it out, the answers in our follow-up email.
Yeah, it's a good question. When you make the call to use an agency, I think any type of like augmenting type recruiting service is you evaluate when you have exhausted or you have exceeded the capacity of your own internal efforts, and you know you need more capacity, and you have different options for adding capacity, and that is hiring more recruiters, hiring contract recruiters, working with a firm like Bank to provide consultants, or working with an agency. In my opinion, agencies are best when you have a handful, 1 to 3 searches that are either very critical or you've had difficulty filling, and you want to get the sort of the focus and dedicated like market effort to go recruit for those roles. Yeah, that's my sort of overall answer on that. And I guess that's the last question. So thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure delivering this presentation to you today. I hope it was useful for you. And again, good luck. And I hope you're setting everything up and like reviewing and uncovering your patterns and what can really get you in the place to have the recruiting machine running as optimally as possible. I hope you can get there. And have a great day.